On this episode of Three Bros Sports Podcast, the podcast of three college students who could just talk about sports forever, Chase Hughes, NBC Sports Washington, is coming on to talk about the Nationals 2020 season and upcoming thoughts about it. Also, we're going over the NBA as a lot has gone down within the past week, especially with the fall of a couple teams that nobody really expected, and also an announcement for all the viewers as well at the end. But first,
shut up and sit down.
Hey, welcome back to another Three Bros Sports Podcast. I'm Connor.
I'm Calvin.
I'm Officer Doofy.
Officer Doofy.
Scary movie.
I've never seen it.
Haven't seen that one. Sorry.
I'll shake my head with the audience members out there.
And this is a podcast of three college students who could just talk about sports forever, or for general whatever's Casey could talk about movies that we've never heard of.
I just like to keep everyone involved.
Okay. But we got an action-packed podcast for you today. So we're starting it off right off the bat. We're jumping straight into it. On the line right now with us, we got Chase Hughes at NBC Sports Washington to talk about the Washington Nationals. Mr. Hughes, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. So let's just kind of dive right into for the Nationals. I mean, the Nationals did the one thing everybody in baseball is so happy about now, like 1,000 times more happier, that you were able to defeat the Astros after learning about the cheating allegations. And it was an amazing series to watch personally for me, as I'm always a big I used to be a pitcher throughout high school, so watching starting pitching just dominate throughout the whole way is just a beautiful sight to me. And this Nationals team was kind of special, as they did hold one of my most favorite players of all time, Howie Kendrick, back on my Angels. It was tough to watch him go, but to see him hit that go-ahead homer against Clayton Kershaw in the NLDS, and then the one in was it Game 6 against Houston?
Game 7 off Will Harris, who's now a National.
Yeah, Game 7. Sorry, I'm losing myself. It's been quite a busy day for us, but losing him, watching him get to do that was awesome. And now going into the offseason, there was a couple acquisitions that were made. I mean, re-signing Steven Strasburg to his massive contract, but also losing Anthony Rendon. Now, if I put you into the general manager's chair and it's just to start a winter free agency, we're in a time machine when we go back, and you have the option of using that 7-year $240 that was given off to Rendon, or if you could give that to Strasburg, which way would you really be going with?
Well, that whole debate was really interesting because we were all operating under the assumption that Steven Strasburg would be cheaper because he's a pitcher, and though pitchers cost a lot of money, Anthony Rendon had such a good year in his walk year, and he's a third baseman. That's a premium position that we just thought that the money wasn't going to be that comparable. It ended up being very, very similar. You know, Strasburg got over $200 million as well. And I think I still, I was arguing Strasburg the whole way, and with the understanding that he would be cheaper. But even though the price got to be as close as it did, I still lean Strasburg because I think what he does is a little bit rarer than what Anthony Rendon does. And I feel like it's a little bit harder to find. And the Nationals, as much as the Major League Baseball has gone away from starting pitching and favored relief pitchers and building out bullpens and having openers and having their starters only go a few innings even when they do start games, the Nationals have maintained this philosophy, which goes back to GM Mike Rizzo's days in Arizona when he had Curt Schilling and Randy Johnson, that starting pitching leads the way. And it's been the way since 2012 when they became a perennial playoff team for the most part. It's been the way they've done it, and they stuck to that model and re-signed Strasburg. And I think one of the biggest tiebreakers for me was the fact that Strasburg was not only great all year and great in the postseason, he had one of the best postseasons of all time. And I think there's something intangible there. It might be a Madison Bumgarner type situation. And if you can have a guy like a Curt Schilling or a John Lester or a Madison Bumgarner, and you get back to the playoffs, I don't think there's anything more valuable than a starting pitcher who can throw several games within a series and dominate every time he goes out there.
No, you're fully right about that. I mean, the best team, like when I personally look at a potential dynasty that never actually happened, was the 2012 Detroit Tigers, and they were just loaded throughout pitching when it was Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander. Basically, they could throw anybody else out there. Anibal Sanchez, basically just listing off the Nationals rotation except for Verlander, but So we were talking a little bit about Anthony Rendon. He signed for 7, $245 as well. Now he's off with the Angels, but from your perspective of you got to watch the Nationals all the time, for all those Angels fans out there, what are these Angel fans going to be getting out of Anthony Rendon?
Well, he's a really fun player to watch. You could see it right away when the Nationals picked him in the first round and he started to come up through the ranks. Maybe the batting average wasn't there, but you could just see that he had one of the more natural swings and one of the more natural feels for the game. It's honestly, he's got one of the more natural swings I've ever seen, especially from the right side. I think, most of the smoothest swings of all time are some of the lefties that people consider, like Ken Griffey Jr. and Will Clark, a guy who used to play for the Giants. But it just looks like he was born to play baseball and born to bat over 300. So it's really fun to watch him. He's just so casual at the plate. I really like his batting stance, and he's really, it allows him to hit the ball the opposite way and hits a lot of doubles. He had the nickname Tony Two Bags while he was here. And then also the way he plays the field is just amazing. I mean, Nolan Arenado, I think for my money, is still probably the best third baseman in baseball, both offensively and defensively. But Anthony Rendon has really closed the gap, and he is a remarkably gifted defensive player. So he just plays the game the right way. He's really good at defense and offense, and he's consistent. And he's just definitely a really, really good player. And he's one of those guys that, maybe he doesn't hit 50 homers or drive in 140 runs or get a lot of steals. But if you like analytics and advanced numbers and wins above replacement, he shows up really well in all those things. So I always respect athletes the most, the ones that are good at just about everything, because it reflects an attention to detail. And he's definitely one of those players.
I'm loving everything you're saying, as I'm an Angels fan right now. So it makes me feel good that Trout actually has the right sidekick next to him, as he's the next Robin. But there's a lot of things that have gone on throughout this offseason, and also basically adding Eric Thames. I think that's one of the biggest underrated moves, and also re-signing. Wait, I'm blanking out on his name right now. Ryan Zimmerman. I'm sorry about that, but re-signing him to just $2 million, I think that's valuable. Like, was there any other sleeper acquisitions that this Nationals team made that you think could really help them going into 2020?
Well, that's a good question, because obviously they did a lot of work just kind of retaining their own guys, like bringing back Yan Gomes as the catcher, for instance, or Ryan Zimmerman, as you mentioned. And there's not going to be any real changes to their starting staff. They've got a competition for the fifth starter, but there's no new names in there. So it's a lot of kind of retaining the old guys. So I think the Thames move is potentially going to be a big one, because I think he's an upgrade over Matt Adams, who they have in that role, which is the lefty hitting first baseman who can provide some power but doesn't have to start the whole year, because they have Ryan Zimmerman. They also, Kendrick can play first base. I'm sure he'll play plenty there. Probably, I guess the biggest acquisition would be Will Harris. Will Harris is a really good relief pitcher, and I think that was their biggest weakness. So bringing him in and re-signing Daniel Hudson, I think you have to feel better about their bullpen than you did going into last season. I think Tanner Rainey is the guy who they traded for 2 years ago with the Cincinnati Reds. He had a bit of an uneven year last year, but I think he's going to have a big season. He really closed strong and became a reliable guy in the postseason. But the one newcomer that I think all eyes are on is Carter Kieboom. He's the top 20 prospect in baseball, and he is set to play third base with Anthony Rendon now gone in free agency. And he's a former first-round pick, a really talented player. He played shortstop in high school and through the minor league ranks, even though he's a big guy. He's like 6'3", 6'4", hits for power. But defense is a real question for him. So that's the new guy on the roster, even though he wasn't an external addition that everyone is paying attention to.
Yeah, I think we can all agree so far that, honestly, the Nationals have had a really good offseason, especially when you compare it to a lot of other teams. I also want to ask you, comparing this team now for what they have, compare it to last year's team that did win the World Series, do you think this team is better now, or is it worse? Is it about the same? And what are your expectations for the 2020 season for the Nationals?
Well, I think as of now, it's hard to say that they're better, because letting Anthony Rendon go does create a pretty big void, but there are reasons to believe that they can win more games in the regular season next year because they had so many injuries last season, and there are guys on their team that can improve the team internally just by getting better. They've got a really impressive nucleus of young talent. Juan Soto is obviously the big name there, and he had a breakout postseason. And I think he has a chance to ascend to like legitimate superstar status and become one of the faces of baseball. And he's only, 20, 21 years old. Victor Robles was arguably the best defensive center fielder in baseball last year at the age of 21, but he had an OPS south of 800 and has to get on base a little bit more, but he's got some power and he hit for average in the minors. So I think he's a guy who could get better. And then Trey Turner, I think, could take another leap. Trey Turner has been a good player. When he came up as a rookie, he hit 350 and stole a bunch of bases and hit for power. And he hasn't really been able to recreate that. But he's a guy who I think is an ascending player who's going to be an all-star at some point. So there is a chance that the Nationals get better. And I think there's a better chance, I would say, of them just simply winning more games if they are more healthy and obviously don't get off to the slow start that they did last year, which was just 19-31. Their comeback mid-season was historically good. So as long as they don't dig a hole early in the season like they did last year, then there's a chance that they win more games.
Think there's a chance for back-to-back championships here?
Well, that's really difficult to do. It's really, really difficult to do. And you look at some of the other teams around baseball, how they improved, the Yankees getting Garrett Cole, the Dodgers getting Mookie Betts. There's going to be some really talented teams out there. I like the chances for the Nationals to get into the postseason. And then once you get there, it's obviously really difficult to predict. And I think they're probably looking at a wild card spot because the Braves did a lot to help themselves in the offseason, and they won the division last year. So it's going to be tough to win the division. Repeating, I don't know. It's been really tough if you look back with the last 15 years of teams that have won the World Series and then tried to get back. The only team that even got back was the Phillies after they won in 2008. I believe they got back in 2009 and lost to the Yankees. That's the only team that's even reached the World Series again the next year. It's very even hard to get to the championship series. And some teams have bottomed out and not even made the playoffs. Like the Red Sox have had this pattern where they just completely tanked the next year. The last team that repeated as World Series champs was the Yankees, which was 19, 20 years ago in the early 2000s when they had that dynasty with Derek Jeter and Posada and all those guys. So it's going to be very, very difficult. I would set the odds pretty low, but I think they can get back to the playoffs for sure.
Hey, you never count out any team with amazing starting pitching, really.
So I got a hot button question here for you that I'm coming with on the spot. Both the Braves and the Nationals, they lost their top third baseman while being top two in the NL East. So do you think that the Braves losing Josh Donaldson means that the Nationals can win the NL East this year? Do you see that making a big difference?
Well, I like what the Braves did to deepen their pitching staff this offseason. I think they're going to have the best bullpen in the division, so that's going to really help them. And the thing about them letting Donaldson go is they don't necessarily have a prospect waiting in the wings like the Nationals do with Carter Kieboom at that position. Right. But their farm system overall is amazing. I mean, they have arguably the best farm system in baseball. I think it's something like 5 or 6 guys in the top 50 or 60. They've got guys at multiple positions. Like they have 2 catchers who are top 70 prospects, I believe, based on MLB.com's rankings. So they've also got some pitchers, right? They added, Cole Hamels and Felix Hernandez, I believe. This offseason.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget about Felix, the 5 ERA of 2020. Yeah.
I forgot about them.
I don't know how much you can count on those guys, but obviously the ceilings are high with them, particularly Hamels, who maybe isn't the guy who won a World Series or World Series MVP, but he's still a pretty good pitcher. So I like the Braves. Their wave of young talent is basically unmatched at this point, and they've got pitchers, they've got position players. So I think there's a good chance that even though they let Donaldson go, that they can continue to improve internally by just having so many prospects that naturally some of these guys are going to work out.
No, I agree with you. It's going to definitely be a battle for the NL East. And now I got one more before I let you go. Now this this is a little more off topic of it, but you are working for NBC Sports Washington, and you cover both the Nationals and the Washington Wizards, and you actually just got to go out to the All-Star game to cover them. Now, how different is it for you to be able to go cover the Nationals, who go win the World Series, and now the Wizards, who have been struggling a couple years, and the future does seem bright up ahead, but it's kind of a low light for right now, and especially with Bradley Beal having 2 50-plus point games and still having losses. I mean, just kind of the momentum of the team just seems a little down.
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of reminds me of where the Nationals were, let's say 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. They were at a low point, and it was 2009, where their GM resigned, and they had this scandal with international bonus money, and basically they were the biggest disaster in Major League Baseball. And when they saw their GM resign, Jim Bowden, who's now in the media ranks, they gave his assistant the job as an interim, and he operated as the interim longer than most people do. I think it was 4 or 5 months before they gave him the job permanently, and that was Mike Rizzo. And Mike Rizzo was able to prove that even though he was in the front office, he was like the number 2 or number 3 in the front office of a terrible team and a terrible organization that didn't do anything right, he was pretty soon able to separate himself from his previous boss and show that he could do things differently and actually be ultimately one of the best people in the business at his job. And I have interacted a lot with Mike Rizzo over the years, and I've also interacted with Wizards GM Tommy Shepard over the years, and there's a lot of similarities between those guys beyond that parallel, which Tommy Shepard last summer operated as the intern for 3 months before he got the job. And he's already, just like Rizzo, doing a lot of things to separate himself from his previous boss. And their personalities are similar. They're blue-collar guys. They're a little bit feisty, but they have really good people skills, and they have a lot of attention to detail, and they work hard. And I think the Wizards are in good hands. It's going to take a long time to kind of recreate what the Nationals have done, but I think they're on the right track. And I think if the Wizards were ever, and I say this obviously understanding their history, they haven't won 50 games or been to the conference finals since the 1970s. But
ouch,
if they were able to build something like the Nationals have, I think it would be just as popular, if not more, because basketball is a big deal in the city of Washington. It's just they're really, really starting from the bottom. So I'm always looking for parallels between the Nationals and the Wizards, the two teams I've covered for years at this point. And I see those, and I don't think I'm off base with them.
All right. Well, Mr. Hughes, thank you just so much for coming on. You for the viewers out there, you can listen to Mr. Hughes on Nationals Talk Podcast, or you can just follow him on Twitter, Chase Hughes NBCS. And Mr. Hughes, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. We do hope to have you on again soon throughout the season, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's do it again.
All right, sounds good. And that was Chase Hughes from NBC Sports Washington. Now, I just want to give a round of applause to Brett for that amazing question. Brett, how did you come up with such a question like that? That's a question I would have asked.
I just wanted to let you guys, get your questions out of the way. I didn't want to suck all the air out of the room with such a fantastic question.
You had it just hidden.
I just started thinking, and a laptop screen appeared in my face, and exactly what I was thinking appeared on the screen. So, thanks for helping me formulate the thoughts that I already had.
Great minds think alike when it comes to that stuff.
We got to work together on this podcast.
There's a reason why we call you the MLB expert out of us three.
Yeah. Now I don't want to take anything away from you guys. So I got to let the young bucks get on out there with us MLB veterans just kind of standing back.
By the way, who's Atlanta's team? Huh? Who's Atlanta's team?
Atlanta Braves.
Okay.
He knows it. Why would you ever question him?
I could tell you the teams. Okay?
And now, do you know the third baseman that the Braves lost?
Donaldson.
Yeah, God, he's a genius. We have a freaking Einstein out here. But before we get off the MLB topic, I just need to quickly give out the Houston Astros update, as I think I'm going to just keep doing this every single week. So the Astros have only played 4 spring training games. They've already been beaten 7 times. This is just bound to happen. And I don't think
they have to go up and confiscate all the signs from the fans and stuff, just trashing them.
Yeah. So I think I said this to a couple friends. I didn't get to say it on the air, but the way that a lot of pitchers are going to get away with this is all they're going to do is be throwing off-speed pitches inside, and they're going to say that it was a mistake trying to do a backdoor pitch. It's just not. Umpires are going to have to be okay with it because it doesn't look like it's intent when you're throwing a 78-mile-an-hour slider versus a 98 heater.
Oh, crap. It slipped out of my hand.
Sorry, I didn't mean to aim for the helmet.
What about the players that just got to Houston and they weren't a part of this cheating scandal at all? And they get out there and they're just getting stuff thrown at them. I'm like, I didn't do it.
But then again, wouldn't those players have known when they signed there that that's what's going on, that they're going to deal with it?
I don't know. A check's a check, man.
Might get a World Series out of it at this point.
It all spends the same.
No, you're right. Now, the Astros have kind of been looking like a...
Or maybe they came in, they're like, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to turn these guys around.
And they take a 100-mile-an-hour fastball to face, see what happens.
Wait till they face Aroldis Chapman. Then let's talk. He's got some revenge for this team. Now, the Astros season, we could kind of go on about it as... I personally think it's actually going to be a fail. I really don't think this Astros team is going to be living up to their expectation to what they think they can do. They think that they can make it back to the World Series. I'm not buying it with all this controversy going around that there's going to be a lot of mental barriers for this team to overcome if they want to still become one of the top teams in the AL. I mean, even losing Jake Marisnick, you lose Garrett Cole, you're number one. Bro, I know you're pretty sad about that when we talked about that off the air. Yeah. Losing Wade Miley. I mean, there's a lot of pieces that you have lost.
My boy Miley.
Yeah, not Miley Cyrus, but Wade Miley to the Cincinnati Reds.
Not to be confused.
Yeah, but they're kind of they have the potential to be one of the bigger failures of the MLB this year. But moving into the NBA, I think the biggest failure as of right now, I could say the Brooklyn Nets, but I'd rather keep it with the higher profile team, the Los Angeles Clippers. This team just has no idea what they're doing right now. And even after losing to the Los Angeles Angels... Whoa, what am I saying? The Sacramento Kings.
That'd be really bad.
Baseball crossover.
I'd be really wondering.
Hey, there's a movie called Basketball. That's what...
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a little bit like The Ringer, the rewatchables. We'll have Brett just kind of do reviews on all those sport movies.
Yeah.
But the
Blindside.
Los Angeles Clippers ended up losing to the Sacramento Kings, and this isn't the first time it's happened where the Kings actually blew them out one time, and this one was a lot closer of a game. They ended up beating the Suns by 10 in their last game as of last night. They're third in the West, but this team just seems really lost. They can't grasp any real momentum.
Who's two right now?
Right now, the second is Denver. Which, I mean, I thought Denver could have possibly taken the number one spot. I didn't see it being the Lakers. I really didn't.
I thought the Lakers would be good, but I didn't think they'd be this good.
No, but it does kind of scare me of with LeBron, how much longer can he really be playing this consistent throughout the year of wear and tear always is going to affect you. I mean, we saw that last year when LeBron went playoff mode in March, and I think they...
Well, he played really well against the Pelicans. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know that he put up decent numbers after coming out slow out of the gate.
Yeah.
I saw Shannon Sharp wearing his goat mask again, so that's always good to see.
But jumping back into the Clippers. Now, I'll throw out this scenario to you guys. We'll go back in a time machine, and you're the general manager of the Clippers, and you have the offer set up for Paul George, for Danilo Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and 7 first-round picks. Would you take that deal off the table? No, like if you just went in a time machine and went back, knowing how this team has been playing, that Paul George, he hasn't really been doing much at all to this team. He's been injured the whole time. It just seems like this team isn't working together. Would you still take that trade, knowing that Kawhi Leonard is saying, look, I'm only going to sign with you guys if you get Paul George? Would you take that trade back? Yes or no? Calvin, I'll kind of throw it off to you. Bill Simmons asked this question, by the way, so I'll give credit where credit's due.
Honestly, I mean, look, I don't think any one player is worth 7 first-round picks ever.
And a promising young point guard.
Yeah, I mean, it's... I don't think I would have, just because, like, when you say Kawhi comes with it, basically, it's definitely intriguing, and I could see why they would still do it. But I just don't know if it's really worth it at that point. I feel like there are better options that you could do for that. I mean, even Russell Westbrook was on the market if you really want to bring in some, like, someone to really put some eyes on the franchise, bring him in.
Well, the only reason why Westbrook went on the market was because George got moved. So it's kind of like all these different moves happened because of Paul George leaving. But still, it kind of throws out, like, it doesn't make too much sense to me looking back at it now. Like, at the time, I thought, well, who cares? That's a generational type player. But then the more you think about it, Paul George isn't that big of a generational player. Like, don't get me wrong, he's a great player.
Maybe like 6 years ago.
Before the knee injury when he was for Team USA.
Yeah.
Or he was the next big thing. But if I really compared him to somebody, this is a big throwback. He's a healthier version of Brandon Roy.
And that is a throwback.
It is. You really got to think about that one. Brandon Roy was a great player for the Trailblazers. A little bit of different positions. He was a shooting guard. George is a small forward. But still, he was a really, really good player. Like, he could drop 27 on you any given moment. Snap his fingers, he got 15. But he wasn't a generational talent. Now, I mean, all credit where credit's due to Paul George. I mean, he's better than I'll ever be at basketball. But 7 first-round picks is for Anthony Davis. That is for Kevin Durant when he's like fully healthy. Like Paul George.
That is for a young LeBron James.
A very young LeBron James. It's just too. I don't know. Maybe 3 would have been. Yeah, that's fine.
Even still.
But 7, like that is just pushing it. Like, would you have done that now? I mean, you had to have done lottery protected for all of those. I mean,
yeah.
I say there's just no way I could risk. That is basically risking the entire franchise all on this one trade. I mean, it'd be one thing if it's like even 7 second-round picks. I mean, like that's a lot.
Yeah.
But you can at least survive that. If this does not work out and you're out 7 first-round picks, that is going to hurt a team bad.
And it's also the Miami Heat draft pick for, I think it's next year's. Well, now people can say, oh, well, who cares about the 20th pick? Well, there's actually some solid players that can go around in the 20s. Let's think about Pascal Siakam. That's one of them. I mean, even if it was in the teens, there's a ton of generational players who were in the teens. I mean,
you can even talk about like Isaiah Thomas. He was
60th,
Mr. Irrelevant of the NBA. It was.
I mean, it's 7 picks we're talking about. I mean, there's a good chance that out of those 7 picks, you could find someone who's going to at least contribute to your team, and that's kind of maybe even underselling it, saying it's going to be one player.
Yeah,
that's a lot of assets.
If you can't find one guy, you're doing something wrong.
And even last year, this Clippers team had 48 wins, and they looked really promising throughout that season as they were the grit and grind. And when you had a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander out on the floor, that guy, he looks special now in Oklahoma City. I don't know if he would have ever gotten that in for the Clippers. I don't know. It's kind of a scenario. We could throw that back, but still, nonetheless, it's a tough trade to do. I mean, even Danilo Gallinari was all NBA 13. Like, that's the way he was playing all last year. It's tough now to look at it like, why would you do that trade? Now, in the heat of the moment, I mean, when Adrian Wojnarowski throws 3 nuclear bombs, like, straight onto your phone at like 1 a.m. Eastern time, saying that Kawhi's now going to go to the Clippers. Oh, and also Paul George just got traded to the Clippers. Like, at the time, it's like, oh my God. But then when
the moment.
Yeah, it's really heat of the moment. You
really
look back
is.
at it. Because don't you think this Clippers team, they could still be competing for the Western Conference Finals if they didn't do that trade? Even if they didn't get Kawhi Leonard, you kept the same guys, you keep your draft picks. You could have signed somebody. There's a lot of free agent options.
I mean, I feel like they could have still been good. Maybe not as good as they are right now, but they would at least be a lot better set up for the future.
I don't think I would have penciled them in the finals if they were, in the Western Conference Finals if they hadn't added Kawhi.
I feel like they'd be like a dark horse team at that point.
Yeah.
But, I mean, honestly, this trade kind of reminds me a lot of when the Nets got like Kevin Garnett and all them, because they just gave up a whole bunch of draft picks to get all these older greats in, and look what happened. It destroyed that franchise for a decade.
So just now starting to get back.
Yeah. I mean, what does that tell you? I mean, stuff like this can destroy a franchise. I mean, you can say we even kind of saw this in football with the Herschel Walker trade that the Vikings made.
Don't talk about that.
But like, even just looking at it, of personally, In my opinion, they could have easily gone after Bojan Bogdanovic. That could have been a better piece to that puzzle, as they were a really well-rounded team. And when we look at the Raptors, they didn't, yes, Kawhi Leonard was that superstar player, but they didn't fully need him to be that superstar player, as there was the Fred VanVleet, the Kyle Lowry, the Serge Ibaka, Siakam. You can have that full team, have 6 guys who can get you a bucket. And I think that's what the Clippers could have done. They don't need a face to the franchise. If you have 7 or 8, amazing, amazing athletes that fit really well with one another. I mean, you could have possibly outbid the Kings for Harrison Barnes if you really wanted to get a guy who you could try to make him as a number 1 option, but he really wouldn't be. I mean, even, I don't know. I just look back at it now. It's there's so much the Clippers could have done that off season. I mean, even get Julius Randle. If you want to partner him up with Montrezl Harrell, that'd be a really nice 4-5 backup right there.
Would.
I mean, instead of spending $50 million on just those 2, you could have easily have gotten 3 or 4 really solid. Keep Gilgeous-Alexander on a rookie deal. I mean, I don't know.
Maybe they could have traded for Lauri Markkanen.
They could have, but I feel like I'm talking about them as if they are the worst team in the NBA, and they're not. They're doing okay. They're doing pretty well throughout this year. They've just had a lot of stumbles here and there. They're beating the teams that they really shouldn't be, or maybe they're the underdogs on. But then it's a team that the Sacramento Kings walk in. Well, the Clippers just lie flat on their stomach. They just let the Kings just score 140 and walk out and just not care. So,
an NBA side note though. I was hearing Angels sing yesterday when D'Angelo Russell stuffed Jimmy Butler. In the last couple seconds to win the game, I was like, thank you. It's finally over.
Yeah, we'll get a little into that in just 1 second. But I think the final question I'll ask about this Clippers team is, are they going to make the Western Conference Finals? Because right now I see it as Lakers-Rockets.
I'm going to give it a hard no.
I just don't see it for some odd reason. If these two, Kawhi and George, they can't get together.
Houston, I don't know, but Denver, I really like.
Yeah.
And Lakers are pretty much a shoe-in at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that.
There's just a part of me that is not wanting to bet against Kawhi in the playoffs to at least get to the Western Conference Finals.
But how healthy is he, though? That's the question.
Right. I see a team. I don't know if I can confidently say the Clippers at this point. Like you said, losing to the Kings, losing to my Timberwolves, I might add.
It's rough.
First game with all those new guys. I don't know. I like the Mavericks, too. I think they're an interesting team. Kind of a dark horse, like you mentioned, to get there. I think it's going to be a tough road to get there for sure with teams like Denver in the mix. But, yeah, I can't confidently say the Clippers either, Connor.
Yeah, I can't either. And now another team that we used to talk about on the podcast that was killing it throughout most of the year, but now they're stumbling really hard. The Miami Heat now, Brett, you're talking about that. But they're 3-7 in the last 10. They've lost to the Timberwolves, the Cavs,
don't you forget
the Hawks, the Jazz, the Blazers. They lost to the Kings and the Clippers.
Me and your teams, man, we're just...
I know, we're beating all the underdogs.
You and I.
We really are.
It's Kings and Wolves versus the world.
Yeah, really.
And now, this Heat team, Jimmy Butler has... there's been some personal issues going on with him.
Surprise, surprise.
And now, it's just bad timing for this Heat team, as they're fourth right now in the East, and they're still 36-22, but... Once again, I kind of had this team locked in for the Eastern Conference Finals on the way they were playing the whole year. Maybe I'm overlooking this slump, but when you're 13-18 on the road, that isn't just because of one small slump. That's inconsistency. And this Heat team, look, you can say all you want about the Eastern Conference. I mean, it's a pretty deep one with your 8 teams, maybe excluding the Magic. But nonetheless... This is still a really solid conference that you got to go out there on the road. You still need to be able to win those games out there. I mean, for instance, upcoming, they're going to be at New Orleans. They're going to be at Milwaukee. They still got games against the Pacers, the Celtics. They still have a lot of big matchups that these are must-win, or else you're going to fall into the bottom bracket, and you don't want to be facing the Raptors or the Bucks. You really don't. These two teams are just killing it on all factors.
That's a first-round exit for you.
I don't want to face the Bucks in general.
Oh, yeah. And now, moving on to the Bucks, they are the fastest team to clinch a playoff berth in NBA history. Right now, they're 50-8. Wow. I mean, well, we talked about them a little, not just a couple podcasts. It was a while ago we talked about them, of how nobody was saying a single word about them. And isn't that kind of interesting?
They're still
they're
not
50
even,
and
really.
8, but you could check Bleacher Report, and they would act as if the Bucks are still maybe like 20 and 40 right now. They just don't care.
You'll see all the articles about the Lakers and the Clippers and all those teams.
If I had $1 for every time I've seen a LeBron James highlight on House of Highlights,
Well, I mean, part of that's
It is
because,
awful.
like, the Lakers are the Lakers. They've won 16 titles. They're Los Angeles, whichever. And then the Bucks, I think they won their only title in, like, 71. And since then, they really haven't even been relevant. So,
yeah.
and plus, I mean, Milwaukee's a lot smaller of a market than Los Angeles is. So, I guess people just aren't really used to the Bucks actually being a good team, let alone as good as they are.
Yeah,
So-
it's been a while.
I just don't know. It just seems quite shocking to me. But the last thing we have for the NBA, because we are on a little time constraint, for all the viewers who don't really know, we do record in the classroom, and this classroom is not just free at all times. There's a class coming up pretty soon, so we do have to like scurry our way out. So if you're ever hearing me personally trying to say, no, we got to wrap things up, that's not because I'm trying to be mean to Calvin and Brad. I try to be a nice little angel to all you guys. Let you guys say and do whatever you want on the podcast and on the show, on our website. Letting Brett post about Christian Ponder being the best quarterback of all time.
Thank you for letting me do that.
I'm kidding.
Thank you for that.
It's just because we try to wrap things up, make sure we can try to edit up this podcast, get it out as soon as possible. But there's one more thing I did want to go over. This is a little shocking to me. Malik Monk, he's suspended indefinitely for violating the NBA drug policy. Now, Malik Monk, he was a guy that looked like he was going to be a J.J. Redick type player coming out of college at Kentucky with De'Aaron Fox. Like, they were a great 1-2 punch throughout the whole year. And he was averaging 16 in the last 3. I don't know what that noise was.
was that?
I think
I don't
it was
know.
a chair. I don't know.
None of us moved.
I don't know.
What was that?
Do we need to
ghost
call
in here.
Ghostbusters?
We need to call Sam Darnold. Come
But
in here with his Ghostbusters backpack on.
But he just really struggled coming into the NBA. Now, he said that he had a tough time just being in Charlotte in general, but it's like, you're not going to LA. I'm sorry, man. If you're having a tough time living the life in Charlotte, I don't want you going to LA. I know what you're going to be doing out there. That is not going to be good. But he's suspended indefinitely. Now,
Did they say like what it was? Like what was the substance?
no, I didn't read that. I didn't get into it. I'd rather just keep it broad about that. But he's going into his next year is going to be his final year of his rookie contract before he can get an extension. Do we see a real future for Malik Monk as a bounce back player? I mean, Ben McLemore, he started to make his bounce back come back to the league after being on the right team. But is Charlotte the right option for Monk? Does he have the potential to come back from this?
I don't see him going back to Charlotte.
I don't see Charlotte being a
Yeah.
good place for anyone.
I mean, they might just see like the past issues he's had with this, and maybe just kind of think that it would be better for both parties to kind of move on. Charlotte get a new player that they can have more faith in, and Malik Monk maybe get a change of scenery, change of people that he's around. Like you said, we don't really know what the substance was. I'm just hearing Stephen A. Smith in my head. He was on crack. No,
Stay off the weed.
there you go.
Yeah. And before we wrap things up today, thank you so much for tuning in, by the way. I'll get that out of the way. This is an announcement to all viewers who may be interested in actually writing. We do have our own website, 3brosports.com. I could plug that as many times as possible, as it's our own podcast. We could do what we want. First Amendment, freedom of speech. But for all the viewers who are into writing about their sports team, we are looking to have a couple people come on and just write a couple articles just for fun. If you are interested in it, you can send over a document to 3brosportscast@gmail.com. 3brosportscast @gmail.com. And we can go over it and we'll let you know if it's up or not. We give you full credit for you having it there, but it is a great opportunity for you to kind of branch out, get a little experience, or maybe you want to do something else instead of just getting a little thing put up onto the fridge. You'd rather have a full article put up onto it instead.
Don't send us some hot dookie, though.
Yeah.
That'll go right in the garbage.
We're not just taking
We'll block you. You'll never submit another article again.
You're not listening to the podcast again. We're blocking all your access. But just for anybody interested, it is an opportunity out there.
This is a place for fine journalism. You'll see the first article that was written is about Christian Ponder and why he's the greatest of all time. So I'm here for a strict, serious journalism, no jokes, okay?
Yeah, and how Delaware should also get their own sports team as well.
Yes.
It is all seriousness
It's
here.
overdue.
Like, this is not The Onion by any means.
No.
This is the top-notch stuff, all right? Let's just get that out there. But that will wrap things up for today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Tune in Saturday. Parker Fleming, SB Nation, for the Memphis Grizzlies is going to be coming on to talk about the Grizzlies season so far and how they're clinging on the ropes to make it into the playoffs this year. But I'm Connor.
I'm Calvin.
I'm Brett.
And we'll see you Saturday. Three Bro Sports would like to thank Anchor FM for sponsoring this podcast and Benjamin Tissot on bensound.com for the amazing intro, outro music.
Shut up and sit down.